Well, welcome back to Tuts Plus. My name's Simon Plant. Today I'm going to show you how to retouch a finely graduated sky. Now you might be thinking, retouching a sky, well that's got to be fairly simple. You've got various tools in Photoshop to help you either clone it and content aware and various other things, but it's not as easy as it sounds. If you've got a sky with lots of detail, lots of clouds, then it's a fairly straightforward process. But when you've got a sky like this one, then it can cause quite a few problems, and I'm going to show you what I mean in a second. So this little bit about this image. This image was shot about a month ago. I was in Portugal for a week. Got some beautiful shots there, some most amazing light in Portugal, and some amazing sunsets that I've seen for a long time. So naturally I went out and got lots of pictures. Now, on a little side note, I'm going to just tell you a couple of little tips here, which I have told before about panoramic stitching. This image, let me open up the Lightroom catalogue. This image is actually two shots here and here. Let me just make these a little bit bigger. And whenever I sort of been told people about stitching, how to stitch, I always recommend that you don't shoot on a very, very wide focal length, because Photoshop struggles to stitch. When you start using wide angles, you get a lot more distortion towards the edges of the picture. Now, there's a lot of new tools in Photoshop CC that can help you, overcome that. But generally, I would still say if you want an easy life, don't shoot with too wide an angle lens if you plan to stitch the images together. Now the problem with this location is I had a cliff right behind me and I couldn't go back. Normally, if I've got space, then I will have gone back maybe 12 foot or something and zoomed in slightly, maybe to about 50mm, and then done my panoramic from there, and that would have allowed Photoshop lots of easy images to stitch together generally, but as it was I couldn't, so I had to shoot on a 35mm focal length, and this caused me a few problems stitching this. So that's a little side tip. If you plan to stitch the images together, with this image I shot these in a landscape format because I wanted a little bit extra width. I wasn't looking for a true panoramic, but just wanted a little bit more width on the picture. But generally, if you're going to shoot panoramics, try and shoot on a slightly longer focal length, because you'll thank me for it when you come to stitch it. As it happens with this one, I had to do all sorts of retouching, and I had to actually strip in this sign separately from another file, and that's the way I got around it. But it works out really well. But the problem with this picture was the sky, and that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to give you some tips on how we can overcome problems when retouching these very subtly graduating skies. So we're in Photoshop CC, and this is my final image that we ended up producing. But this is what it started with. This is the actual stitch that I ended up with out of Photoshop, which stitched the two images together. And obviously I had to do a little bit of retouch. I had to add this sign in from another image for the reasons I told you a minute ago. And it was fine, absolutely fine, except I just didn't like this dead branch. This branch obviously fallen over this tree. Had fallen over, and it was adjusting into the image, and it bugged me. So I decided I would take that out. So not a big problem, you might think, and generally around the sea area it's not. If this sky was had lots of cloud in it, etc., again, probably wouldn't have too many problems. The problem is it hasn't. It's a very graduated sky. It's obviously at dawn. The sun's just coming up behind the mountains over here, and you can see that on the leaves over here. But generally, the sky's still got like a subtle glow to it, and it's very finely graduated, not only from here to here, but also from top to bottom. And when you come to retouching that, it's a real pain, because trying to keep that graduation in your cloning or whatever tools you use generally doesn't work well at all. So I'm going to show you a couple of techniques that I use, and I think you'll find these quite interesting, and it could save you a ton of time. Okay, so I've decided to reduce the size of this image. It was nearly 1.5 gigs in size, and to save my sanity, and to save your sanity, and to save me receiving any nasty emails from my photo editor, I've reduced the size of it to speed things along. Actually, I don't get nasty emails from my photo editor. Cameron's a very nice chap, and I love him to bits, so I'll get that one in. So we've reduced the size to speed things along. Now, what I'm going to do is to prove a point to any of you doubters that some of these wonderful tools that we've got in Photoshop that don't actually work in some situations, and I'm going to prove that to you. The first thing is the content aware. I'm going to grab a marquee tool, rectangular marquee tool, spit it out, and I'm going to draw a selection around this image, around there for starters. I'm going to right click, go to fill, and we're going to go use content aware to fill that. Now, content aware has been sort of hyped up to this wonderful one-click solution to all your problems. In my opinion, it's not. On small areas, it's great, but on areas like this, you can see already, it's not as so good. In my opinion, that is generally the case. But you got to understand, I am quite fussy retoucher. I just spent 70 hours on an image retouching it, and I like to retain as much detail in my pictures as possible. For some, these tools might work well enough, but for me, they don't. So I'm going to Command Control Z to redo that. So that one I'm going to show you doesn't work very well. As I said, as a starting point, sometimes the content aware, can be useful, but in my opinion, it doesn't work all that well. The next thing we're going to try is a good old clone stamp tool. I'm going to add an empty layer above. I'm going to grab the tool in question here, and I'm going to make sure that it's set, the hardest is set to 0, to the softest setting available, and we want to clone from current layer and below, and I'm just going to Alt or Option click here on the side and start cloning some of these areas. Now, this is probably one of the better solutions to the problem here, because we can just very slowly work our way around the image like so. But you have to be very careful where you're cloning from, as always, but especially on this image, as I said, we've got such a variation in tone here, graduated area tone, that if you are slightly off and come over here, it's just going to go very wrong very quickly. So that is one way of sorting out the problem, but it's going to take you a fair while. Let me just show you an option that I've started using just recently, and it's not an option that I would have automatically gone to for this type of image. The technique I'm going to show you is actually quite good for skin retouching, and maybe if that's not been covered already, that my lovely editor might let me do a quick tutorial on that. But for the time being, let me just show you this version, and it involves using the paintbrush tool and actually just painting over the image. Let me show you. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to turn on this layer. This is just the retouching I've done of the sea, because it's just going to help us see this effect better. So this is what we're going to start with. We've got to obviously take this branch out of the sky area, which I've showed you is not as easy as it first seems. I'm going to add an empty layer, and I'm simply going to get a paintbrush. Make sure that the hardness is set to 0. Want a nice soft paintbrush. Might be an idea if you're not using a Wacom pressure sensitive tablet, just drop the flow down to say 40%, something like that, because we want to build this up gradually. And as we go over the image, we want to hold down the Alt or Option key to sample the various colours. Now, we're just painting with the colour from this original sky. So I'm just going to hold down the Alt or Option key, that samples, and I'm not going to be too precious about this. I'm just going to start to paint over the image like so. At this stage, we don't have to be too precise. Just try and get it as close as we can. Keep sampling. And the idea is, just like with clone, is we want to try and pick an area of the sky that matches what we're trying to remove. I'm just going to gradually build it up like so. And it's a very quick and easy way to remove the problem in question. It looks like the dog's chewed it at the moment. But as I said, I just want to get a bit of a foundation on there, and then we can fine tune it as we go. So that's our first part done. I'm now going to sort of refine this a little bit better. We can either add a new layer, which I think we'll do, or we can use the one we've already got. So let's just use a new layer, then if we get a problem, we can always just backtrack a little bit. So now I just want to blend this, so a bit more careful now. I'm going to start from the top, and I'm just going to gradually paint in some of that tone from the surrounding sky, like so. Don't worry about going into the sea, because we can again sort that out in a minute. Just keep sampling. Don't try not to rush it too much. Obviously, I've got a bit of a time to keep on this video. I don't want to go on forever, as some of them have done in the past. So you get the idea. So just take your time. So now, if we zoom out, there's before. There's after. It's still a bit rough around the edges, but we can come in and we can tidy that up. And I'm going to do that and switch the video off and just come back to you in a second once I've had a bit of a tidy around. Okay, so what I've done is I've layered most of those layers together, and I've simply just gone in, I've added a layer mask, and I've just painted away from the areas that I didn't want the paint to go in. So I'll just delete that a minute. So this is our painted layer, and as you can see, if I zoom out somewhat, I managed to blend that in much better. There's still a couple of areas that need adjusting, but you can see the before and after. There's before, there's after. Now, compared to the cloning, that's taken me probably a quarter of the time to do. Now, what we can do, if need be, is we can go in and just blur this a little bit. So let me do that. Let's go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and just add a very slight softness, but obviously we've got to watch, because as we do that, it may well reveal some of the information underneath, which we don't want. But we're going to drop this down just a little tiny bit, just about 1 pixel, 1.5 pixels. Let's go for 1. And what that does, it just smooths out any brush lines that we might have. Now, the last thing we need to do is, because this, we're just painting a flat colour over the sky, which is done us a great job. As I said, it's still not 100%, but for this video purposes, it showed you what you can achieve. But what we need to do is add a little bit of texture back in there. Otherwise, it's gonna, when we zoom in close, we'll get it printed. You may well see that it'll go from a nice graduated sky, maybe a little bit of noise, and then it'll go completely flat color, and we don't want that. So, good idea to add an empty layer, new layer, go to soft light. And tick the box which says fill with soft light neutral color, 50% grey, and call this one noise. Click OK, and what we're going to do is literally just zoom in a little bit. We're going to add some noise to this, so filter, noise, add noise, and I don't want to add a tiny little bit, but we can always knock the opacity down, so it's best to add maybe a little bit too much to start with, and we can always drop it down afterwards. So let's try an amount of somewhere around 1.52. Make sure it's Gaussian blur and it's monochromatic, like so. Click OK, and then we just need to go in and really about 100% and see if that blends in well. The other thing you might worth doing with the noise layer is go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian blur, and just add literally half a pixel or less of blurring to that noise layer. The reason for that is back in the day of film, grain or noise, as you want to call it, would not be as sharp as that. So that just makes it a little bit more organic and less like digital noise, in my opinion. So 0.4, add that. And then it's just a matter of just making sure that blends in nicely with the rest of the image. And I don't think that's too bad a job. Before, after, let me just see where I was. Okay. So we made such a good job of that, it's actually hard to tell where the actual painting is. As I said, it still needs a bit of tidy up, but you can see with a little bit of love and care, you can actually get this to blend quite nicely. And the best thing about it really is that rather than using a clone stamp tool and spending ages doing that, this is a much quicker fix to the problem. As I said, still a few things, little bits there to add in, but you can literally just keep adding layers and just gradually build it up bit by bit. Well, I've hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. I hope it's given you a few new ideas of what's out there, what's available. So Photoshop's a great program, don't get me wrong. I just think some of the tools don't always work as well as they would like you to make out they do on certain images. And with these graduated skies, it is quite a tall order. So I think the only way forward is to do a little bit of a manual retouching as opposed to relying on any automated tools. And I think that's a kind of good balance. It's a quick, easy fix, and it's actually a very effective fix. Till next time, thanks for watching. Cheers.